This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, we've got some major unexpected news out of Utah that can actually have a big impact on the House of Representatives. What just happened there?
Yeah, people are surprised to hear this, but there has been a case going on in the state of Utah over that state's drawing of its congressional districts. That has been a bit of a sleeper case, but a very, very important one. And yesterday, the Utah Supreme Court came through big and overturned a trial court's dismissal of the lawsuit that had been brought by the proponents of fair districts in that state and sent it back to the district court for further hearings. And so, the claims that the legislature acted unconstitutionally, they're going to continue in court.
Now, what could we be looking at in terms of new districts if we actually do get to fair maps at some point?
Yeah, so this is, I think, one of the reasons why people haven't paid enough attention to this Utah case, is people assume that it's Utah, and therefore, what does it matter how you draw the maps? Well, it matters a lot, because the fact is that Salt Lake City itself, which is the largest population center in the state, has a large Democratic electorate. Now, it's not like a Democratic city like, LA or San Francisco or New York, but it is enough that if you drew a district that did not split Salt Lake City, which is what the Republicans did, they sort of carved up Salt Lake City. If you had a Salt Lake City-based district, it would be a lean Democratic district. It would actually likely yield a Democratic elected official. So that is the stakes here. The stakes are whether or not the people of Salt Lake City will have a congressional district that does not treat them as something to be scattered to the winds, but rather to be given political power.
And again, we're in a political environment right now where the House can be determined based on one or two or three districts. I mean, right now the margin is right there. So I mean, a win in a place like Utah could very well be the difference between a Speaker Johnson and a Speaker Jeffries. With that said, this victory comes a full year after it was brought. I know we've gotten a crash course over the last few months in the mind-numbingly slow nature of the courts, but a year to decide a case like this, to me, still sounds kind of insane. Is this normal?
So, look, I think we have to be very, very precise. We have not gotten a crash course in how slow the courts can move. We have gotten a crash course in how slow the courts can move if the courts want to move slowly. We have also seen courts that don't want to move slowly, and they have moved fast. So I'm not going to say that that's what was going on in the Utah Supreme Court, because I don't know why it took a year in the Utah Supreme Court. But I do think we have seen enough examples of enough courts that, when the U.S. Supreme Court wanted to make sure that Donald Trump got on the Colorado ballot in a very, very important constitutional case, they seemed to move heaven and earth to move very, very quickly. When the Supreme Court wanted to make sure that there could be no further trials against Donald Trump before the election, they managed to hold that case until the final day of the term, and then gave him near absolute immunity. In a state like Wisconsin, where the Supreme Court wanted to move fast to make sure that there would be ballot drop boxes, we saw the Wisconsin Supreme Court move really fast. But you're right. In this case, we have seen the Utah Supreme Court rule in what I think is the right way, but it took them a year to do so. I mean, and really ran out the clock for 2024, so that we're really only talking now about relief for 2026 and beyond.
Right, and that's the point that I wanted to bring up, because the ultimate result of this is that even though this didn't go Republicans' way, they still got the gift of a delay, which they can use to their benefit, and now we won't have fair maps in place for 2024.
Yeah, and I think that people hear this and they say, well, not fair maps for 2024, or it's one seat. If you're a citizen of Salt Lake City, Utah, your constitutional rights under the state constitution appear to have been violated in 2022 and now in 2024. So for of a 10-year period, which is what the redistricting is, for at least 4 years, you have had to suffer the indignity of representation that is illegal, unconstitutional, and does not represent you and your community. And no American should have to live through that. No American should have to suffer that indignity, whether they are the black voter in Alabama or a black voter in Louisiana, or they are a voter in Salt Lake City, Utah. Like, we are seeing Republicans play for time. And we talk about it as playing for time, but we don't oftentimes focus on the the result of that for the voters, right? Yeah, sure, the Republicans get to win, Speaker Johnson gets to win, and and you're right, Democrats nationally get to lose, but the voters in these states are the real losers, and the courts need to be doing more to protect those voters.
Are there any other cases on your radar that are similar to this one in other states?
I mean, look, I think that the state of Texas, there were lawsuits filed in the state of Texas against the map that was drawn. They were filed almost, if not the same day, the day after the maps were drawn. So these cases have been sitting and pending now for years. And we aren't even talking about, the kinds of rulings, good or bad, by the way, in Texas, that we've talked about in other states. So we will roll into the 2026 election cycle effectively, with Texas still being pretty much a blank slate. And that's a big state. And we're talking about a state where the claims against the state of Texas are that they discriminated against black voters. They discriminated against Hispanic voters in drawing their districts. They violated the Voting Rights Act against black and Hispanic voters. And across a range of districts. I mean, we're not talking about one seat. We're talking about 6 seats, 8 seats, and we've seen how absolutely pernicious and aggressive Texas can be in violating people's voting rights. And so, I think that is a state I am very, very focused on.
So, Mark, that's Texas, but what about Florida? What's happening right now in Florida?
Yeah, you're exactly right. Remember, Florida also has fair district amendments. They passed their people. The citizenry there actually went to the polls and with more than 60% of the vote said, we don't want racial gerrymandering in our state. We want fair districts. Well, what did Ron DeSantis do? Remember this? Ron DeSantis vetoed a Republican legislative bill that would have had, in my view, not fair districts, but would have had fairer districts. He vetoed it and insisted they draw a map that violates the state constitution as well as federal law. And my law firm and my team has been litigating that case. This involves, the Black Opportunity District as well as others. And that case remains pending before the Florida Supreme Court. And we need a ruling in that case as well in time for 2026.
All of which, by the way, underscores the fact that the work doesn't just stop after the general election. There is going to be plenty of work to do as we fight for fair maps, equal rights across the country as we head into 2025, 2026. So for those watching right now, to support Mark as he continues that work, even beyond just this major election, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the free news outlet he founded to focus on everything voting and elections. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Mark, all of this brings me, I guess, to the broader point here is we're seeing these scattershot rulings, court cases, decisions all across the country. Would some kind of national solution, a Voting Rights Act, for example, be an appropriate legal, constitutional remedy to all of this?
Yeah, look, I think the only remedy to this at this point is going to be congressional legislation. The Congress, Democrats, when they controlled the House, passed the Freedom to Vote Act, the For the People Act, and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Those laws were crafted in part to deal with this exact problem, to deal with the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court has cut back on the ability to use the courts as a way to remedy these problems, and to end the gamesmanship that we see Republicans play. So, we need those bills to pass the House again. We need them to pass the Senate. They came close. The filibuster kept them from being passed. And we need a Democratic president to be able to sign them. So, whatever else people do, they need to make sure they vote Democratic.
Now, I don't want to end on a down note here, but let's say, for example, that we do have Democratic majorities in the House, the Senate, and the White House, and we do pass Freedom to Vote Act, whatever H.R. 1, Voting Rights Act, whatever it is, would that be able to withstand litigation in the U.S. Supreme Court?
Absolutely. It would withstand litigation in the Supreme Court for congressional maps. The Constitution gives the states the right to draw congressional districts, but it expressly says unless Congress sets a different set of rules. So Congress has the ultimate authority to set the rules around redistricting. And it is high time that Congress does that.
Perfectly put. So we will, of course, continue staying on top of these issues as we always do in Democracy Watch. For those watching right now, again, to support the work that Mark is doing in the courts, please sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.